Again, my name is Peter Crofton. I'm chair of the Energy Law section of the State Bar of Georgia. I want to thank you for attending this CLE program. It is our inaugural program. We've got a series of these lined up. I do want to encourage you, if you have speakers you think would be good for the section, or if you have topics you think would be good, please let any of us who are officers or what have you know, and we can start exploring that. I'm going to kick this over to Anna Parks at this point, who can introduce our speaker for the day. Anna Parks.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today. We're lucky to have Buford Pollitt here to talk to us today. Buford's a professor of energy law and commerce at the University of Tulsa. He obtained both bachelor's and master's degrees in geology from the University of Georgia, go Dogs, a master's in international business management from Pepperdine, and his JD from Loyola University in New Orleans. He's a licensed attorney in Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana, and Georgia, and is also a licensed geoscientist in Texas and a proctor in maritime law. His areas of expertise include alternative energy, carbon management, gas, geothermal, hydrogen, oil, solar, wind, and renewable energy, just to name a few. We are lucky to have Buford here today to present on the landscape of renewable energy across the United States. And with that said, I will hand things over to Buford. Thanks everyone again for being here today. Hope you enjoy.
And everybody, can you hear me okay? Just make sure we're good. Good. Well, listen, I broke out the green shirt today because Masters Week's coming up. I didn't want to wear yellow or gold because offend anybody from Georgia, or wear red and black and offend anybody from university. So try to keep it neutral. This is my contact details. Please reach out to me at your earliest convenience. I know I've got a lot of slides that you've been provided, but don't worry, we're not going to hit all of them. I've come from any. We start on time, finish on time, and we'll take questions the last 10 minutes, 10 minutes to the top of the hour. So if you have any Q&A that you want to make or questions you want to add to the discussion, please put them in the box, and Peter and Anna will go over them the last 10 minutes of the session. And what I really want to do is break it into two sessions. Being a geologist, double dog from Georgia, really start off with the resource. And you're going to see, well, there's a takeaway slide. Yes, we'll have a takeaway slide for the resource. And then we'll move to the legal framework, which is important. And my way of seeing things when it comes to energy and real estate all fits together. That'll be the second half. And then we'll have some takeaways there. So being a geologist, you kind of have to look at the lay of the land, and we're focused on Georgia, but I want to give you kind of the big picture at Georgia. University of Georgia, we had a saying called get high early, kind of look at the big picture and then zone in down below. So, the resource. I'm really going to tell you the slides that have the images. That's where I'm going to spend my time. The words, I think it's really important. I'm not going to touch those very much except for the legal piece. But in the resource piece, we're going to spend most of our time on the images, okay? And you see Georgia, you've got certain regions. This is kind of zooming in, shows the geologic timetables. Now, since this is legal CLE, I'm not going to go through the timetable here, but if you want to discuss that later, we're glad to do that. But focusing in on Georgia, you have the three regions. I grew up in Wrightsville, Herschel Walker's hometown. I have a family farm down in Johnson County. By the way, I'll be back in Georgia over the summer if you want to meet. Be glad to meet you in Georgia, anywhere, anytime. I live in the coastal plain down there. Of course, Anna and Peter are in the Piedmont, and you have the Valley and Ridge up in the upper Northwest. And it's really, the geology of Georgia really dictates a lot of the resources that are available, not just in energy, but also in agriculture. This is a geomagnetic map of the state. It's really emphasizing, the more lavender colors. Has a more geomagnetic signature. Just want to highlight, as you get up in the Northeast, you can see some of we have the mountains of Northeast Georgia, some really interesting geomagnetic signatures. On my family farm in Georgia, in East Georgia, something interesting is going on down there, and you can see that down in Southwest Georgia as well. But really talking about what type of energy resources I want to lay down the foundation. We call it renewables, but generally it can also be called alternative. And again, I'm not going to read the slide, but I'll basically say alternatives can also include things like nuclear and hydro and clean coal. But for our purposes, we're going to talk about today, we're going to focus on what most people consider purely renewable resources. Okay. We're going to really focus on solar, wind, geothermal, biomass, those kind of things. And this is our agenda. So this is a very complex slide. It's one of my favorites. It covers everything from biomass, wind, concentrating solar, thermal, photovoltaic, solar is more what you think about. It also talks about tidal, wave, hydro, geothermal. All I'm going to say about this slide basically is to note that the highest overall potential when it comes to renewable energy in the US is, you can see photovoltaic solar is several magnitudes larger than wind. Wind onshore is larger than offshore wind potential, roughly 3 times as much. Geothermal, 38 gigawatts, water power 68, and you can see biopower. So solar is really one of your higher potentials when it comes to energy. And also making this slide really interesting are the transmission lines. You can see that on the lower right. So looking at ocean and wave energy, in fact, I think Peter made the comment, the magnitudes, I'm not going to read the slide, but this is the wave resource potential map around the world. And this is an example of the type of current and wave potential here you have in the US, both current-wise and also offshore. And this is what I want to highlight. You remember I showed you the image that showed the gigawatts. What are we talking about wave potential? Terawatts. So you might say, well, what's the difference? Well, imagine the wind blowing at you, you're standing there, you got 50, 60 miles an hour, 50, 60 mile an hour winds. Well, you may not have much wave energy off the coast of Georgia, which, we'll highlight. But if you're standing on St. Simon's Island on the beach there, or I should say Jekyll, and a big wave hits you, even a 4-foot wave, I mean, the amount of force you receive from that wave is a lot more than that wind. It's easier to stand up in a 60 mile an hour wind than a 5-foot wave. So you can see the various magnitudes of energy that we have here, with the West Coast and Alaska being the most potential. And I would highlight that we do have the Gulf Stream as a potential source of energy. And this is another image showing those type of potentials. One thing I want to highlight is Georgia. I really want to thank the section for asking me to do this, because I'd always visualize this. These are the river basins in Georgia. And this is an image I'd never utilized before until this session. And I will highlight this. Most of the natural lakes are in South Georgia. Most of the man-made lakes are in North Georgia. I'm going to skip all this. This one is Lake Sinclair. And I'm not going to go back to the original slide. Can anybody tell me, this is crap, we all went to law school. Anybody want to guess why Lake Sinclair is in Milledgeville? And why is Lake Sinclair, and why are all the man-made lakes, I almost gave away the answer, and Milledgeville above? That's not exception. That's not entirely true. You got, I think, Lake Blackshear down in Southwest Georgia, but why are most of the lakes in the Piedmont? I just gave that away, but anyway, what do you think? Anybody want to answer? No? In the chat, anybody put in the chat? Anybody in the chat? Anybody? Anna, Peter, David, put it in the chat, the questions?
I see that Robert Highsmith raised his hand. Robert, I think you had to put the response in the Q&A. Maybe in the chat.
This is the first test question.
You should be able to do chat or Q&A.
I'm not seeing anything typed in yet, so.
I'll go ahead and I'll answer the question. It's on the Piedmont. Right there above, it's above, if you look at the rocks, it's just north of the fall line from the coastal plain. And you can see the rocks down below. So it's just easier, the engineering cost to do it in those Piedmont regions or valley. We can do it also in Northwest, but most of our lakes for power are the dams and all are in the Piedmont region, not on the coastal plain. And this is Lake Sinclair's dam. So geology does dictate engineering. I never said that before, but I like that. Geology does dictate engineering. And these are the turbines in Lake Sinclair. We also have pump storage and Peter, I was talking to Peter when we were going through this session. We have pump storage here in Oklahoma, but actually Peter was telling me he knows the guy that actually built this pump storage in Georgia. Pump storage is where you take, say, a water reservoir, and then you pump when you use the hydroelectric power that's generated. You don't have to use that. You can also use, solar power, but you have to have some power source to lift the water to a higher elevation. And then when you need that power, you let gravity is your friend, flow that water down through turbines and generate power. So that's what we call pump storage. And there's pump storage in Georgia, and there's pump storage here in Oklahoma. And this is the pump storage facility in Georgia. I love the images. I mean, it's just a great engineering concept. And this is the generator inside. Now we're going to move to wind. And wind, again, back to if you're a tech grad, I'm sorry, but back to our Georgia Field School expression, get high early. I don't mean Colorado high as in smoking, but I mean get high early. We had our field school in Colorado, and looking at the big picture, this image tells you why you put wind farms where you put wind farms. The lavenders, the blues are where we have the highest wind concentrations off the coast of Massachusetts, like the Saudi Arabia of wind, also Pacific Northwest, Great Lakes, but also where I am is the mid-continent in Oklahoma. And this is one of the main reasons we have wind is it's basic geology. You have the Rockies, the air coming over, there's dry, you have the hot plate, the Gulf of Mexico or America, whatever we call it, that moisture coming up from the south, you have the cold air from the north, and that all mixes, and you get a very strong ability to have wind currents, predominantly from the south, not always, but it can be from the north as well. But that's why we have so much wind potential here in the mid-continent. Also notice Texas. Don't leave out Texas. Now near Brownsville, south of Corpus Christi. Apologize to our friends in Georgia. You can see our wind potential is not that great, but the Carolinas, you may say, well, why the Carolinas an active offshore wind leasing area? Well, there's your answer. You see it on the map. And here we go. Solar, get high early. You can see basically want to be in the southern part of the U.S. And thank you for the section. I never pulled this map before on Georgia, but you can see why a lot of the solar developers want to be in Southwest Georgia, even though they're putting them on green fields where there's basically green, really nice farmland. Your highest potential is in the southwest part of the state. But you also have to have transmission lines as well. That takes us to biomass. I like biomass, and this is where I phrase biomass as organic energy. For me, this is no different than natural gas and crude oil because it's the same, as I learned at Georgia, it's the same chemistry. It's just one is being cooked a little longer and under a little more pressure. But biomass can be wood, crops grown, hay. By the way, in the lower left-hand corner, you see a landfill. And here in Oklahoma, I took my students there. We have a landfill run by Republic Services. And that landfill, they capture the natural gas. We'll talk about that more in our third session. And there's a natural gas processing plant right next to it. They clean it up and they put it in the pipeline and they get the carbon credits out of California. Kind of cool, huh? So impacts, biofuel is often seen as a competitor with food. And you can see biomass was really popular about 17 years ago. Crude oil price is about $150 a barrel. and that's when in fact, Peter, it's amazing how many places Peter and I overlap. Peter knows some of the people that actually in Georgia were building those biofuel facilities at that time that went bankrupt. I remember one in Johnson County, my home county. It's now a solar farm nearby. And there was one in Truton County. And I'd be loved to talk to you, Peter Bohr, and others about those types of incidents, because I think there are really great lessons learned there. Then we moved to geothermal. By the way, I'm going to say this. I know it's a bad joke, but it's true. Geothermal is a hot topic. I know it's not funny, but it is one that this really provides really great base load. Basically, you're taking the Earth's temperature, at certain depths and generating power. And yes, we can do that even in Georgia. My dad had a high school education. He, rest in peace, he died in 2016 and my mom died in 2018. But back in the 90s, they put in a geothermal heat pump. My farm, as of right now, my farm in Georgia is the power in that house is by a geothermal heat pump. The heat and cooling it's really nice. But we're in East Central Georgia and you can do that. There's other things you can do. And I want to and this is really an important slide. The geology dictates what you can do unless you add innovation. Now there's some technology innovations that we're not going to get into today that can enhance some of this and do different things. But if a general temperature is just basic geothermal, like the family farm in Georgia, you're generally going to be doing geothermal heat pumps to do power generation. As it says here, you're going to need to be around 250 degrees Fahrenheit or higher. But this is really, I think this is, if you're into geothermal energy, this is a really good image to remember. And I'm not going to go through the full process, but basically you're using the heat in the subsurface to generate outflow and you capture that. This is a geothermal plant out west. Now we're going to move to hydrogen. Hydrogen is one of those areas that under the previous administration was pretty popular. It's really important still in Europe. We take our students to Europe every year, and we were in Aberdeen 2 years ago, and we were riding on hydrogen power buses. It's kind of neat to ride on those around town. All the buses in Aberdeen are powered by hydrogen power. We look at hydrogen potential here in the U.S. You're really looking at, again, I'm in the sweet spot. I say this is again. You've seen all the reasons why I'm in Tulsa, right? Because there's so much going on in the mid-continent, energy-wise. The highest energy potential when it comes to hydrogen is in that same region, and this is not this is not in isolation. If I took the wind map, overlaid the solar map, overlaid this map, you'd see almost the same image. Okay, so this is green hydrogen, solar, wind, mainly is the output or the sources for the renewable. And so this is a really good indicator. As you can see, though, if you look at Georgia, really talking about higher potential in the Southwest and East Central Georgia. And this is really explains the technical processes of hydrogen and fuel cells. Basically, you're putting, if you go back to how you generate it, you take the renewable energy source and you have water, and through the powers of electrolysis, you produce oxygen and hydrogen. Excuse me. And you can use, this is the fuel cell type technology that our bus in Aberdeen was powered by. Now looking at market size, crude oil is still the biggest, but we're going to look at some minerals right quick. We're not going to talk about storage too much. I just want to highlight, you've got to have storage. Often we talk about battery storage, and why would I say that? You just have to have it, especially with these renewables. And I'm going to skip a few slides. I will talk about this right quick. I do want to show you, this is the main storage sites. We'll talk about these later and next time we're together. But you got to have storage when you have wind and solar. And you might say, why is that? It is because we have grids. These are the basic grids that we have, and they need stability. And what is important about that is, you can see what's been added power-wise. Every regional transmission organization has added renewables more so than any other source except for one, that's PJM, which is PJM is basically Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, Virginia, DC. And I'm not going to go Socratic method on you. Basically, that is the Marcellus Shale. That is natural gas. So every other RTO, like even Southwest Power Pool where I'm sitting, they've actually added the most renewable energy sources. You look at PJM, they've added 75%, which is on the other end of the spectrum. They've added 75% of their power generation being natural gas. And why is that important? Because grid stability. I learned this a couple of years ago, that as you bring in there's an inflection point. As you bring in over 30% grid integration of renewables into your grid, you lose grid stability. So you've got to have base load. You have to have base load. And what I tell people is I do not want grandma to die in upper Minnesota, because in the wintertime it gets very cold. If the grid goes down, grandma dies. So you have to have base load. Okay. Basically, Minnesota is adding substantial amounts of renewables, and they need grid stability. I was in the meeting where some people said that they might even have to use battery acid to stabilize their grid because they're competing against EV critical minerals. Give you a real life example. Winter Storm Uri hit 2021 in the mid-continent, especially in Texas and Oklahoma. And if you look on the right, you see right after Valentine's Day, really wind and solar went down for a certain period of time. Natural gas maintained for the most part. The grid in ERCOT almost collapsed. A lot of people did die. And here's the power production in that time frame. I remember it was cold. I remember some cold days in Georgia when I was at University of Georgia, but it wasn't, no, it's cold in Oklahoma. But yeah, you can see you've got to have grid stability. And we skip over these. Back to the point. How do you get stability? Is going to be either natural gas or some type of storage. This is not just an incident that happens in the US. In Europe, which is highly dependent on renewables, you can have wind droughts. Europe is very much concerned about wind droughts. They happen quite I wouldn't say often. I mean, it depends. Well, they happen every few years, okay? And it can, sometimes more than once a year. And that can really cause a problem when you're relying heavily on wind. So this is the takeaway when it comes to renewables. Your intermittent wind energy sources, say wind, solar, they can't be considered a constant energy source. The wind doesn't blow all the time. The sun doesn't always shine it doesn't shine. I mean, it does set, the sun does set at night, right? So you have to have your base load, battery storage, organic base, fossil fuels, geothermal, hydro, or nuclear. You got to have your base load. And this is going in, just got to give you a perspective of how the energy sector looks in the near future. We're actually entering the heyday of natural gas and the golden age of new energies coming in. But we're not going to talk about natural gas much today, but I just want to point out that natural gas is the near-term future for baseload. So key takeaways. We're finishing on time on our first half. That's good. The challenges of green energy storage, the cost of implementation, lack of standardization of storage systems, and the regulatory policy and market design. Okay. As it says here, these are just the tip of the iceberg, but energy storage is presenting many more challenges that companies and businesses will have to deal with in the next few years to completely commit to an energy transition and energy efficiency. Yeah, so the key takeaway when it comes to energy sources, if you want to move to solar, you got to have your backup. Okay, you got to have a backup. You got to have a base load. Okay, and now we're shifting gears to how a geologist from Georgia who goes to law school sees the world. The most difficult class I ever had was structural geology under Dr. Dahlmeyer at the University of Georgia, which forces you to learn how to think about how you see the world, not just one-dimensionally, two-dimensionally, three-dimensionally, but four-dimensionally. And so we're going to look at some of these frameworks, and we're going to talk about property rights and how certain states handle that. And this is a quote, that I want to highlight. It's been said that Wayne Gretzky said this, that a great hockey players, a good hockey players know where the puck is. Great hockey players know where the puck is going to be. As it says, skate where the puck is going, not where it has been. But this is from my professor at Loyola. Good lawyers know the law. Great lawyers know where the law is going. And so that's what I want us to think about. So this is the structural geology mindset that guides everything I do, whether it's teaching students, whether I advise clients. I still do some legal work for my former employer, and I do review solar releases and things like that. So when I'm looking at what the law and a project, an energy project, this is how I handle it, okay? First thing I look at is location. I pick a dot on the map. Where's the project, okay? Then I'm looking at the activity. What are we trying to do there, okay? And here's a quick example of that. We're in Colorado, and this is a situation where I was watching one of the shows, one of these home building, shows, and they were building a bicycle clubhouse in the mountains in Colorado, and they needed a water supply. I was like, it's interesting. I can see that. I like to cycle. Well, anyway, what they did is they used rain barrels to collect the water. That's interesting. If I didn't know this, I actually checked to confirm. Your residents are allowed to collect rainwater in 2 rain barrels with a combined capacity of 110 gallons, which can only be used on location collected for outdoor purposes. By the way, I haven't checked, but I presume this is not the same law in Georgia. Okay, this is why we kind of have to think about locality and what are the governing factors here. Well, this is location and this activity. So this is a 2-dimensional analysis. Now I'm going to go 3D. We're going to do 3D now. Location, activity, and interactivity, and I'm going to call this jurisdictional interactivity. In other words, like local, state, federal, okay? So we're going to pick a place, Malibu, where I went to get my MBA or Master's in International Business in Pepperdine, and we want to build a house. Okay, think California, you think high regulatory area. Interactivity there, think about federal, state, and local jurisdiction. Building a house in Georgia, my farm, is pretty simple. Let's look at one in California. This is the construction site. I know Peter's in charge of, by the way, I used to work with Technique, so construction is one of my favorite things, EPCI contracts, so I love them. So we're building, this is the job site. We're building a house in Malibu. This is the finished product. I hope you recognize something special about this house. The roof are the wings of a 747. Beautiful home, by the way. I hope it didn't burn while it was those fires up. Hopefully didn't. But let's go through the 3-dimensional analysis of this house construction. The project needed 17 government agencies and a 2-year process, and pass a visit from the suspicious Homeland Security personnel, plus FAA requirements, which were later retracted. The FAA was going to require them to put red X's on the roof of the house to deter pilots from calling in a crash. Where's the location? Probably less than 30 miles from LAX. So this is what I consider a high level of interactivity, jurisdictional interactivity, okay? I presume if I went to build a house in my home farm in Wrightsville, I don't think I'm fairly sure, I don't think I'd have to go through 17 agencies. I presume so. All right. So what I want you to learn how to do, this is if you get nothing out of this, please get this. This is the paramount thing I'm pleading everybody. This is what I teach my students: visualization, visualization, visualization. Whatever the project, we're talking about renewables today. I'm giving you an oil and gas example. I got a wind example too. Basically, I need you to be able to go for, okay, what do I need to do to get access to this location, to evaluate the potential development? For example, if it's solar, or especially we're going to talk wind as well. Wind, I'm going to have to do wind studies. We just can't show up on somebody's farm and start doing wind studies. You're going to get that access, right? So you're gonna have, you can start at high level, but you got to get pre-bid, exploration and appraisal, development, operations, and decommissioning. Most lawyers think subject matter, cyber, right? Or securities. I need you to think, okay, whatever phase I'm in, what are the legal subject areas that impact that activity and who has jurisdiction? Okay. So it's, you got to think of a grid of what am I trying to do? What level of jurisdiction may interact with that activity, and what is the subject matter? It's really fun when you, once you learn how to do this. I have clients, I have people, I have students, and it just makes, it just opens up your eyes. You can see problems and opportunities that people don't see until they happen. Okay, it's really a fun exercise. I apologize if I'm too passionate about this, but this is, but you can see here, here's some of the offshore wind, and these are time frames. You need to visualize these because it can impact your client's ability to get the work done. Offshore wind lease, 2 years of planning, 1 to 2 years of leasing, site assessment up to 5 years, construction and operations up to 25 years. You know, it's 2 years of construction and plus 25 years of operations. So you're talking a decade just to get started, right? So you got to, this visualization exercise can really help you. And I'm not going to lie, I am not sitting in Tulsa today if I did not develop that skill set. I mean, I moved from Georgia to Houston, Houston to Paris, Paris to The Hague, The Hague to Adderall back to Houston to Dubai, and then here. I also went to Iraq. Don't forget Iraq. But yeah, I mean, it's a skill set that brings value to yourself and to your clients. So again, high level interactivity with the federal, state, and local authorities. And the one I gave you an example. And then the fourth dimension is time. 4D visualization, and the key skill is to visualize. Okay, if you play golf, you should understand this concept. All right, we got some quick discussion of potential environmental regulations. You talk about jurisdiction, protection of habitat and species, water use and discharge. Those are all things that can impact your project. Remember, federal jurisdiction, limited jurisdiction, state jurisdiction, general jurisdiction, and of course, you may have certain counties, like New Orleans is a home rule city. One of Denton, Texas, tried to outlaw fracking. It is a Dillon rule city. It learned it was a Dillon rule city quite quick when the State Railroad Commission in Texas reminded Denton, Texas when Denton, Texas tried to ban fracking. Excuse me, Denton, we like your town, but this sits under the jurisdiction of the Railroad Commission of Texas, and your zoning prohibition against fracking operations is not within your jurisdictional authority. Sorry. And even at the same level of governor, you have interjurisdictional agreements between various agencies at the federal, state, and local level. And even at the same level of government, there are often MOUs between, say, the BOM and the Coast Guard, offshore, for example. And I strongly recommend you go look at those memorandums of understanding between these agencies. I do. And there's some important statutes that apply. We'll talk more about these later. I said I don't want to spend a lot of time on the words, but I do want to highlight land applies not only onshore, but offshore. We have our offshore blocks that extend out from it's still land. It's just submerged land, right? And getting close to Georgia, you have offshore blocks. Okay, you can see those 3 miles by 3 miles. Just to give you a high level view, we don't have a lot of federal land in the state of Georgia. It was very interesting for me to see that Texas is one of the states with the least amount. If you look up there, Iowa has very little federal land. This is both federal and state lands, but you can see why the people in the West are really concerned about federal lands, because that's where most of our federal lands are, except for offshore. And this is BLM land. Now we're going to get to the legal doctrines, okay? We're going to talk about the ad colum doctrine, petroleum projects, and then some interactions with stakeholders. back in the day, back to Roman time, don't ask me to say the Latin. I apologize. One regret about my double dog education, Johnson County education, that I didn't take Latin. Hopefully I will one day. But basically it means the expression, to whomever the soul belongs, he also owns the sky. We had a case, I'm going to quickly highlight this. World War II is going on. You got a farmer in North Carolina who's a poultry farmer. His farm is right next to an airport. He's complaining about the planes, in World War II kind of killing or impacting his operations. And he sues, and ultimately the court says, it goes always Supreme Court, that the Congress has spoken, Interstate Commerce Clause is one of those nice things, and that the airways above a certain height are the public highways. He's bringing a claim of trespass. It's like, no, you can't have flying across country or even a certain distance and every landowner being able to sue. So that private ownership interest must yield to the public. Then we get to our petroleum projects and theories of ownership. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. This is in your notes. You have estates. It's your bundle of sticks theory. You're all old school. I will say that in Louisiana, you have what we call ownership. We don't have bundle of sticks. It's basically, by the way, you can't split an estate. You have a servitude. That's what this discusses. And really, I want to talk about this. Everything we're going to talk about today about the law is, and also about the in the future, is how this bundle, the different sticks get allocated. So we'll skip through this. So a lot of times here in the U.S., in the common law jurisdictions, you'll have a surface estate that's been split from the mineral estate. That act is called severance. The surface and mineral estates are severed. It can be either in the conveyance of reserving or conveying those rights. And in Louisiana, we don't have that. It's called a mineral servitude. You have holistic ownership of the land, but you can lose the servitude if you have a period of 10 years of non-use. I do want to highlight, just a reminder, you have different freehold and non-freehold estates, right? Visualize in your mind, oil and gas lease is a fee simple determinable estate, freehold estate, and that the determinable element is as long as you have production and paying quantities, which means your production is more than your cost. Wind and solar leases create a tenancy in years, which is a non-freehold estates, which puts them at a substantial disadvantage to a mineral estate, I think, overall. This is the key point. Outside the U.S., government owns all the minerals. Forget about it, except for Canada a little bit. Canada, there's some up there, but this is why we have so much production of oil and gas is on private lands. The federal government can do whatever they want. Now, of course, they can regulate air, through Clean Air Act and all that. But no, that's why Texas is Texas. I mean, they're going to produce as they're going to produce. As long as there's not a preemption, in federal law on emissions or anything like that, there's nothing the federal government can do about what Texas does on private land. That is why we have so much oil and gas production right now. There's two theories of ownership. There's non-ownership, exclusive right to take. You have in Oklahoma and California, an ownership in place. Texas and Colorado. Basically, ownership in place, own the minerals, but the movement of oil and gas on land of another terminates that right to those set of molecules. This is your basic geology. The point is, if you've heard of unconventional or shale revolution, I'm not going to go through the schematics, but basically unconventional, you're going in and fracking and producing directly from the shale or to release the hydrocarbons. Conventional, I grew up a farm in Georgia, we call it a post hole. Imagine take post hole diggers. If you dug a post hole, right, you dig straight down. That's what you're doing with the conventional oil and gas. You're just digging a post hole straight down and extracting the gas from the reservoir and letting the natural, you can use artificial lift or some means to get it out of the ground. But you're basically going straight down. With unconventional, you're going down and then you're going diagonal or not diagonal. You're going in a certain direction and you're following the zone of the beds and fracking and producing. We have something called rule of capture in the U.S. It goes back to hunting and fishing. You gain possession, you own it. But we also have a concept of doctrine of correlative rights that developed over time. And what does that mean? It comes from a case in Texas where you had a blowout, and I'm not going to read the whole slide, but what I will tell you is this. No owner can be permitted to carry on his or her operations in a reckless and lawless way, but must submit to such limitations as necessary to enable each to get their own. This is a key case. If you look at the time frame, if I go back 1948, you can see conservation is coming more important. We don't want to waste. And so basically you can develop your own as long as you're not reckless and damage the correlative rights of your neighbor. We also have something called executive rights. That means you have the right to execute oil and gas. And this is something we'll talk about in solar leases. When developers, I got 3 developers calling me up about my farm in Georgia. It's amazing what's happening in the last month in Johnson County. They all want the executive right, which means they can prohibit me from executing a kaolin mining lease or any other lease. This is something I recommend. Don't hand over your executive rights because that means you are no longer able to execute other agreements. That is a very important concept. A lot of the solar leases that I've seen ask for the executive rights, and it's like, no, we're not going down that road. Let's go to different approaches as we kind of go through these. Look at construction. I'm not going to read all these. They're in your materials. 2 doctrines I want to discuss really quickly. Ejus Dem Generis doctrine we have here in Oklahoma basically means of the same kind, and natural meaning, which is Texas. That's what we're really going to focus on. Of the same kind, basically oil, gas, and minerals of the same mean has a common knowledge. It means oil and gas and other minerals similar to that. It doesn't mean coal. Coal is going to be completely different. So in other words, if you convey oil in your conveyance or reserve in your oil and gas and other minerals, you're just getting the oil and gas and minerals of the same kind. You're not getting coal and things that are not oil and gas and of a similar nature. Okay. As it says here, I love this quote. Oil and gas and other minerals is not a description of the entire mineral estate. What makes this really nice in Oklahoma that fits with this concept, we have a statute in Oklahoma that says, and this is going to talk about pore space. Pore space is very important when it comes to carbon capture. We're not talking about carbon capture today, but this is why Texas is in trouble when it comes to their situation as compared to Oklahoma. We have a statute that says the pore space is part of the land, and as a result, the surface owner or the person who owns the surface owns the pore space. Clear as day. Why is that? Well, the key is we have a lot of natural gas storage companies here. And my theory is they did not want to talk to the mineral owners. They wanted to talk to the less sophisticated surface owners. And so they could execute gas storage in depleted oil and gas reservoirs. So they would have a better economic transaction for the gas storage companies. I will say that some of those gas storage companies are sponsors of our programs, but this is my thought process. Basically, I don't have any evidence to prove it. It's just I think there's a very strong economic interest in midstream here in natural gas storage. I'm not going to mention any companies' names because it is being recorded. But the point being is that that's why I think the law expressly gives pore space ownership to the surface. And of course, notwithstanding, there's other things that can be done. Then we get to Texas, right? You look at the ordinary meaning of the term. Severance of the minerals and oil and gas and other minerals includes all other substances within the ordinary meaning of the term, whether they have value or not at that time of severance. This was this is a court limitation because they didn't want people to go back and start, litigating. In Texas, we also have the surface destruction test that if you have to go through the surface and destroy the surface, then basically, then it's part of the surface estate. That give you an example, gravel. This is the reason there's a professor, I'm not going to mention his name, but he takes 8 steps to explain why the owner of the pore space is part of the surface estate. Nothing against him. It's just, in my view, if you have to go through 8 steps, you kind of have your answer. This is why companies in Texas are executing pore space CCS agreements with both the surface owner and the mineral owner. Texas has not clarified that by legislature. And I think the mineral estate, this is my opinion, I don't have any legal evidence for this, but I think the mineral estate owners are so powerful there that they do not want to lose their rights. And so you've got a very strong political tension between the surface owners and mineral owners in Texas. And this is, I don't know if it's going to be resolved anytime soon. So if you're doing work in Texas, you kind of have to execute with both surface and mineral owners. There's other states that have a container. You talk about, if you go to Alabama, you have the coal bed methane that we often think about, the Black Warrior Basin. I'm not going to go through that. That's not that important. Oh, you may won't be interested in brines. We'll talk about that in the third session. Arkansas has the Shorehacker case that interprets all coal and mineral deposits did not reserve title to the oil and gas. So you've got that case that this Exxon and a lot of companies are extracting brines. So there's some interesting work. We'll talk about more of that in the third session. And then ownership after extraction. Again, I say this is very political. Go to Kentucky. If you re-inject the gas, another party can take ownership of it. It's considered an abandoned gas. I think that's because they have a very strong coal industry. We have a very strong midstream industry in Oklahoma. The general view is once you extract the gas, if you put it back, it becomes tangible personal property. I just love the property descriptions. And it's absolute ownership. And so if you re-inject the gas back into the subsurface, you don't lose ownership, even though it may move around a little bit, but you don't lose ownership. I think that's the midstream lobby here in Oklahoma versus the coal lobby in Kentucky. And this is the oil and gas, look at it as wild versus domesticated animal. I just love these real property analogies. And, back to our point. We're going to finish up on time really well. That's good. Key concept, jurisdiction, the power and authority to exercise, the power and right to exercise authority over an activity. I'm going to give you an example as we wrap up, and we'll look at this one as we go forward. Michelle owns 215 acres of land, hereafter called the right 215 acres. You might recognize that's my farm in Georgia. In a Commonwealth jurisdiction state in the U.S., Michelle decides to sever ownership above the surface by selling the ownership of the surface while reserving the ownership of oil and gas minerals. In 1995, Michelle sells via valid conveyance the surface estate to Samantha, while Michelle reserves the mineral estate for herself and oil and gas and other minerals. 2 years later, in 1997, Michelle executes a valid oil and gas lease with Early Exploration and Production, hereafter called Early E&P. The oil and gas lease is for a 10-year primary term. Early E&P drills 3 wells and achieves production in paying quantities in one well in 2 sandstone formations. Production in paying quantities continues on the oil and gas lease in one of the 2 sandstone formations. There we go. In 2015, the EPA promulgates the Clean Power Plan on the Clean Air Act. As a result, space carbon capture, hereafter called space carbon capture, sees a business opportunity going forward in utilizing depleted sandstone and oil and gas reserves for a long-term storage of carbon from coal power plants. Space CC has identified the right 215 acres as ideal for this venture. In 2020, Sunny Day Company has identified the right 215 acres as a good location for the new solar farm. Please discuss the rights in the pore space and the non-producing sandstone. Also, please discuss the interaction of the rights and obligations of Early E&P, Space CNC, and Sunny Day Company. Nice example. No test, but we'll be covering this over the next 3 sessions. And so the takeaways, parties need to understand the legal authority regulating that location. Jurisdictional authorities may change, and don't forget the 4 dimensions. That should be like a band, I guess, right? Anyway, any questions? I think we went a minute over, apologize, but I'm here to answer any questions.
If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A stream so we can look at them. Let's see what we have.
Was it a death march?
No, this is good. So everybody knows a professor is a member of the Georgia State Bar and a member of our energy law section. So we're hearing today from one of our own.
Even if I'm not a tech grad.
Do we have any questions in the in the Q&A. I'm trying to scan it quickly. One other thing I'll mention while we have a second is Professor is going to present 2 follow-on sessions, one in April, one in May. April will focus on solar energy in Georgia. May will focus on other alternative energy sources and carbon management in Georgia. So we're lucky to have kind of a 3-part session. I think today was kind of an introduction to some of the legal issues and so forth that you'll see come up.
Right. But before you get to pick questions, Peter, I just want to add what Peter and Anna are doing is something that I've been wanting to see in Georgia for a long time. And so I'm hitting you with a fire hose, but I want to congratulate the 2 of them and everybody in this room, because you guys are taking on something that since I was a little kid, I've wanted to see in my home state. I'm not going to cry in front of you, but that's how emotional it is for me. So, by the way, I've gotten approval from TU and my wife that I will be at the state meeting in June, I think it is, right?
Yep, in June. Early.
And you are going to have a social, right? I hope you have a social. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody there.
Yes, we are.
So
and
I'll be there.
Look forward to information coming out of the bar on that. Professor, I don't see a question in the chat, but I'll pose one for you. You talked a little bit about rule of capture and how that sort of developed through the oil and gas sector. I think I've seen some case law where they're now applying rule of capture to wind.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. We'll get there. I saw that. That's the visualization. And if you want to, I can pick that up and give you some images. I would, when you talk about visualization, one of the key things about wind is it's most productive when you have what we call laminar flow. And when you have a wind turbine, it becomes turbulent flow. The efficiency of the wind turbine goes down. And, I'm a visualization person. I say, oh, I could visualize that. What's going to happen if I'm downwind? And my productivity of my wind turbines is not going to be that great. So I actually foresaw this in my mind. Oh, what can I bring? What legal theory? If I don't have a statute. Now, there are some states that are passing statutes about, like you would for spacing for oil and gas, configurations for wind farms to increase their efficiencies. But I came up with a legal doctrine before I've already saw any litigation. I was thinking of nuisance. Okay. So and I've seen this in solar too, somebody blocking your sun. But the common law theory I would use is nuisance, because if you say I have a wind farm and I'm already there, and you put one upwind from me, and you start placing your wind turbines in a configuration that makes my wind flow turbulent and decreases my efficiency of my turbines, then I'm going to bring a nuisance claim. And remind me, Anna and Peter, remind me I'll put that in the slide. Even though we're talking about solar, I have a solar case that talks about nuisance too, and I don't mind adding a wind slide behind it just to give you the comparison.
Could you get there as well with correlative rights?
Yeah, you could get there. It's similar doctrine, but it is a question of negligence or a grade of, what do you call it? Of course, I'll pass the bar here. The activity going from negligence to gross to intentional, reckless disregard, willful misconduct, intentional. You can bring a tort claim. That's what I love doing. Bringing, if you say you're a property lawyer, but you still need to remember your torts. You can't forget your torts law, right?
All right. Well, do we have any questions down here in the Q&A? Looks like we might have a couple more. Question about wind and the Trump administration.
Good luck with that. Being honest with you, I'll give you a quick example. We advised a group out of NOV that was competing against my former employer, Technique, they were putting an offshore wind project offshore California, and the grant was going to be funded under the Biden administration. They got the award, but that award is kind of questionable now because a lot of that's been cut. If you want to do wind, I would not focus on offshore wind. I would focus on onshore private land in jurisdictions that allow you, less fights. But remember, more you're doing on private land. I got this from the tribes. We just had a tribal conferences. The fewer, this goes back to our 4-dimensional analysis. If you want to build a wind farm in a shorter period of time, decrease your jurisdictional interactivity, right? That's the key. Pick a spot where your costs are going to go down and you're going to get it online quicker. If you're having to deal with 17 agencies to put up your wind turbine, good luck with that. You're talking to probably 2 to 5 years. If I can go to a farmer down in South Texas or West Texas, where it's not as complicated, you can have it up in 6 months to a year, maybe, or 2 years. Does that make sense? Pick your spots. Kind of like playing football, right? Pick your spots, or golf. You think I'm joking, but I actually play golf just like I play law. I figure out what I work from my hole backwards. Not to say I'm always that efficient, but that's in visualizing a project. What is my target? When do I want it done? And what do I have to do in my approach shots, in my approach work legally to get there? I mean, seriously, I'm dead serious. That is where you got to, what do I want it done? Work back. Does that help?
I think that's good. Well, I see we're coming up on the top of the hour. So again, thank you, Professor, for putting this program on for us. Thank you to all of you
Anytime.
who have joined in today. Again, we've got 2 more sessions coming up in April and May, and we look forward to seeing you there. And certainly first week of June down in where are we? We're at I think Ponte Vedra this year for the state bar meeting. So.
And I'm bringing my clubs. And by the way, I'm honest. If anybody wants to play around, I don't mind staying an extra day.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. This concludes our first CLE for the energy law section of the state bar of Georgia. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Adam Parks.
It's a pleasure.